The massive news, and we spoke about this last week about the turmoil that Aston Martin are in, and all of a sudden, Audi's, um, you know, basically team principal, um, has left. Jonathan Wheatley immediately left for personal reasons, and everyone is saying, well, of course, he's on his way to Aston Martin. Could this be
I
true?
mean, what an interesting week it's been. I feel like if there's no drama on track, it's definitely happening off track. But that is the big question. Is the new principal of Aston Martin going to be Jonathan Wheatley? Now, if we remember, this all actually started in 2024 already, where we
Mm-hmm.
saw this mass exodus of a lot of Red Bull heads. We saw Jonathan Wheatley leaving. He was the first one to leave in May. And then later on, we saw Adrian Newey was the first one to leave. And then Jonathan Wheatley left a bit earlier on, a bit later. And I think when we saw this max exodus, everyone was kind of like, okay, what's happening in the Red Bull camp? And then, of course, Christian Horner got let go of just a couple of months after that. We then saw everything that's happening at Audi and their project, which is headed by Matteo Bonotto, and bringing in Jonathan Wheatley as team principal. And let's just remember, last year they did pretty good. I mean, for him to be at the helm when Nico Hulkenberg and the team got their very first podium at Silverstone, that was amazing. I know, Sash, that was one of your favorite races of last season.
Yeah.
So they've been doing pretty well as well. And going into the season, Audi bringing in their own power unit, we thought, okay, with Jonathan Wheatley at the helm, there must be something good happening. And then all of a sudden, it was kind of like, okay, Adrian Newey's team principal at Aston Martin and the managing technical director and a stakeholder. There's a lot
Mm.
going on there. It's a lot of responsibility. And then all of a sudden, Adrian Newey also gets let go of as team principal and will just be focusing on the technical directing part, focusing on the design. And Lawrence Stroll has come out recently and said, we don't comment on speculation and rumors, but he is a very important part of our team, and we don't know what's going to happen in that role. And we're not a traditional team like everyone else where we've got a team principal role and something else. We have created our own model. But now it begs the question of whether or not we see Jonathan Wheatley going into to Audi, because with immediate effect, Matteo Bonotto is now taken over at Audi. He's now the team
Mm.
principal going into Japan. And it still leaves that unanswered question of what's happening at Aston Martin. And with how they've been performing, I mean, when you look at the last race that we had in China, we had Lance Stroll was out, didn't finish the race. We had Fernando Alonso, who was out as well, complaining of numbness in the hands and toes, saying that the vibration was really significant and causing a lot of damage to not only the chassis but to the drivers as well. I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that you can't have, if I do say so myself, someone who is managing the organization and the leadership structure and focusing on design. That's a lot of hard work for one man to do. And I think that with Jonathan Wheatley taking over that role, we know that they have a good relationship, Newey and Wheatley. It makes sense, but it's a matter of when it's going to be announced, because I think at this point we kind of all know it's bound to happen at some point in the next week or so.
So let me put on my rose tinted glasses over here. They're a little bit small. There we go. Did you also notice that last week in China, Adrian Newey wasn't there?
I did. He was back
So,
home because apparently they had said it was because he wasn't supposed to be on track for that particular weekend. That was the excuse that was
how
given.
can a team principal not be at a racetrack? I'm not interested. It doesn't make any sense. These people who write these copywriter PR nonsense BS, blah blah blah. We don't speculate on rumors. Oh wow! All of a sudden, Jonathan Wheatley's out of Audi. He's worked with Adrian Newey before. As I agree with you, it's just a question of when it is going to be announced. They are in total turmoil. They have got huge issues by bringing Jonathan Wheatley in as team principal. I think is a very, very clever move because it'll take a lot of pressure off Adrian Newey, and Adrian Newey has got a huge job to do with Honda. Now, the problem that teams that in the past that have had with Honda, and I'm not talking about the 1980s with McLaren. I'm talking about when McLaren in the 2000s, 2010s decided, let's go back to Honda. Honda are based in Japan. The rest of the teams are based in the UK. There's a huge time difference, and all of a sudden, lost in translation happens tremendously. we spoke about it last week. Clearly, somewhere along the line, Adrian Newey either designed something or redesigned something which wasn't to spec with Honda, or Honda got given the completely wrong brief, and all of a sudden it's not fitting together. It is not going to be an easy fix for all of them. But perhaps taking Adrian Newey out and saying, Adrian, don't worry, you've got more than 100 gazillions that are coming into the bank. We've got to fix this car. That is what Aston Martin wants. Aston Martin wants to become world champions. Lawrence Stroll wants that. And they've started off in probably the worst possible scenario. So it's going to take a lot to fix it, but maybe Wheatley could be the calming part of getting the team restructured and motivated, and then saying to Adrian, okay, you and your engineer type people go and figure out what you have done wrong and how you can fix it. But either way, it's going to be a very, very long struggle for all of these people at Aston Martin. And yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that Jonathan Wheatley's on his way there. He worked so hard for so many years under the helm of Christian Horner, got the gig at Audi, shown that he really has the mettle. You don't just give up that gig without being offered something else. So somewhere along the line, they've let him go. And maybe not a bad thing for Audi as well, Delucia, because also lots of chiefs within Audi. And, you know, maybe Mattia Binotto just sits there and then eventually takes the helm and then finds somebody who's probably not as alpha male as the others. Maybe need somebody who can maybe control a little bit easier.
Well, that's the beauty of this. I think Audi's in such a good position in terms of stability. And by bringing in Matteo Binotto is already the head of the project, it's familiar territory for the drivers, for the team already. So where they are at least just moving someone into a role where they do know who he is, they do know what Binotto expects from them. We do have Bortoleto and Hulkenberg there. I think that they're still in a very secure position. A lot of people have obviously been asking, you know, why would you leave? Because you're in such a cushy position as the team principal of Audi, because things have been going really well. Their trajectory has been just improvement after improvement. Now going into Aston Martin, it does kind of feel like you're stepping down because you're becoming a fixer. And I think that a lot of people are a bit worried for Wheatley, just because, yes, he's done a good job at getting Audi where it is, but Aston Martin, like you said, has got a lot of issues with their car. And I think in the last couple of years, especially leadership wise, it's been very all over the place. So I hope for his sake that it is a move that is best suited for him. I don't doubt that the bank account will be having a lot extra zeros in there, but I think that if we know that Newey and Wheatley work well together and they've been able to have multiple championships together, they should be in a really good position to hopefully, you know, have some good development over the next couple of months, especially because, you know, we had a lot of high hopes for Aston Martin. That was the one team everyone was really looking at, like, okay, you're bringing in Honda, who's had so much success with Red Bull. You're bringing in all these big guns to try and reposition the team and bring them into the top place, because just a couple of years ago, Fernando Alonso was sitting on the podium every weekend. And then all of a sudden it just went downhill from there. It just doesn't make sense mathematically. But if what is going to play out is going to happen, which I think we all know it is going to, I'm quite curious to see if that will be the missing piece of the puzzle that Aston Martin needs to really just pull up their socks.
Also, another factor that comes into this is that, you know, Jonathan Wheatley spent most of his Formula One life in the UK with his family. Now he's had to move to Switzerland to go and join Audi. Always can be very disruptive. And now all of a sudden, if the Aston deal comes off or whatever, he's back and relocated at home, which also make him a lot more comfortable. So we wait, and I'm sure an announcement will be made this weekend in Japan.